I'm Bill Simmons, Artistic Director of the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center in beautiful downtown Indianapolis. Today, I am talking with Lauren Briggeman, who is the founder and Artistic Director of Summit Performance Indianapolis. How are you, Lauren?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Yeah, like how you're doing pretty well in the midst of all this. You're just sort of hanging in.
Yeah. Well, I would be lying if I said there were not days where it felt rather tedious. And just a little frustrating that, as you very well know, theater is mostly on hold, other than, being done in some sort of virtual format, or I think we're going to try to brave the outdoors for a reading at some point. But other than that, it's a little frustrating, a little discouraging, but we're hanging in there.
Yeah. And so you and your wife, Sally, how are you doing with having a little tiny one? Well, he's not a little tiny, he's like a toddler now. So
yeah, he's 3. That has been kind of the major, a major life shift for COVID, because he's not in daycare right now. And so we've just mostly been handling it between the two of us, because it's also kind of hard to find a sitter that is isolating and that, everybody's doing their best right now, but a lot of people have different opinions about what that means. And so we've been doing it mostly between us, and that's tough. She's still working full time and I'm working part time, and things happen. He's, in a phase where he's deciding whether or not he's going to keep napping. And he wakes up usually between 5 and 5:30 in the morning. So it's definitely a challenge. Those days get really long when they're this age, because they just require, you can't not pay attention to them. And
I don't think it sounds inappropriate at all. I think, having been in a similar boat 15 years or 18 years ago when my son was first born, and being primarily I was working part-time, June was working full-time. I was really the primary caregiver, and also trying to work professionally as an actor and a director. And I don't know if I was teaching yet or not, but it's really hard. And then I just had a conversation with Lori Hudson of the New Harmony Project, and she and David are in a similar boat with a soon-to-be 2 and 5-year-olds at home, and trying to be managing a theater company in the midst of a pandemic and also be caring for little souls. That's exhausting.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, we have one, and I'm like, how do people with multiple? How do they do it? I don't know how they do it. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's been really great in some ways. It's been really nice to be able to spend some real quality time with Isaiah at this age. They're so malleable, and they really are sponges. And like right now, he's starting to spell words, like he's starting to recognize letters, and so it's just
awesome.
Yeah, it's two-sided. It's been really great to have time with him, and then some days I'm like, oh, I can't go to the zoo again. That's what since the zoo is open, we've been there like every other day, because we're just like, what do we do with this kid? He needs to run around. He needs to, so.
We were that way with the Children's Museum. It sort of felt like go to the grocery store, go to Target, go to the Children's Museum. Like it wasn't something that at some point I became like something that I had to do to break up the monotony of a week, and not necessarily because I was looking forward again to being at the Children's Museum.
Right.
And my son was obsessed. There was a kinetic sculpture made with billiard balls.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not kidding, hours in that gallery, and getting him away.
That thing might still be there, Bill.
Well,
thing with the water and
yes. Yeah, the same room with all, it's like the perfect storm, like where the kids can get wet, and there's the loud kinetic sculpture, and then across the other side of the museum is a carousel, and it's just like all the noise.
Yes, as much input as possible. Anyway, I mean, it's actually we have a great zoo, which I don't know that I appreciated until we had Isaiah, but Indianapolis Zoo is great.
So like, I'm curious, I've been asking other artists, artistic leaders in the community. I had a conversation with Lou Harry recently. So kind of where are you with Summit in the midst of the pandemic, all the social unrest around Black Lives Matter, us, I think, finally starting to kind of peel back the onion on systemic racism and 400 years of oppression. Where's Summit with all this? You as an artist, And then I'd also like to hear like what your conjecture is as to where you think theater is headed over the next couple of years while we're making our way through this next couple of years pandemic.
Sure. So it's since March, right? That's when everything sort of went on hold. We had been in the middle of rehearsal for a project, one of our, we call them community conversation one acts, which was about members of the transgender and gender non-conforming population. And so we ultimately decided to turn that into a digital piece. And we did a live streaming of that. Was the first adjustment that we decided to make. And then we had a staged reading of Crimes of the Heart planned, and we, just put that on hold indefinitely. I watched as sort of IRT and you guys and other companies were making lots of contingency plans, and really I decided that we should just wait for a while and see where all those pieces fell, because so much of it has to do with venues and when buildings are able to open safely.
Yeah. Are you, just out of curiosity, I don't want to break your thought process there, but like I've listened to some and watched some readings of plays, and I watched Hamilton recently just because I'd seen it in Chicago and we decided we wanted to see the original cast and the film production of it. But I have not been, well, let me just ask you, are you like watching a lot of theater content that's like in the can or listening to readings online?
I would probably be tuning into more local things if I was on social media. I personally am not on social media, which is also a double-edged sword. So I mean, personally, that's the right choice for me, because it's just too much information. But professionally, I think I miss, yeah, it's definitely a trade-off. So I think I miss things. I would watch probably more local stuff.
I found one of the ways that I'm able to take in new scripts is not to sit and watch them, but to listen to them maybe while I'm out in the yard working. So like I was doing a bunch of work planning and pulling up thistle and all this stuff down at the far end of our lot, and I listened to my friend Olivia Lilly's, she runs prop theater in Chicago, and she's a BIPOC artist and has written a really interesting play. It's a 5-hander, 4 women and a man. It really is about systemic racism. It's about an undocumented immigrant and her relationship with this very powerful white woman. It's not just a business relationship, they're in a personal relationship, and it's just it unpacks a lot of stuff for me. And so but it was good for me because I could hear the play, do it like a radio play. I listened to it and I was able to absorb more than I think if I were watching it, but because I feel like I need to spend more time just reading and listening and talking to colleagues about the state of their theaters and kind of what they think is coming down the turnpike for us, for the theater world. And I just feel like Lou Harry calls it the great pause. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like, so I'm getting back to reading a few scripts, but yeah.
Yeah, me too. I am starting to delve into some. I think I sort of mentioned this, but I think we actually are going to do an outdoor reading, but it's not going to be Crimes of the Heart. I think just where and not that we're necessarily going to do something super on the nose with where we are with COVID and with systemic racism and things like that, but just looking for a script that, I don't know, Crimes of the Heart just doesn't feel quite right for me. I don't know why. Just because of what it is, I guess.
But even before the pandemic, I was like really looking for plays, and I've said this publicly for about a year or so. I'm like, I can take a really hard journey within the course of a play, but I gotta leave the theater with some hope. Mm-hmm. And that was I thought many of the beautiful elements to the Agitators that you were part of this past March was, there's a lot of, I mean, it's not horrible. It's not like, a staged version of Handmaid's Tale, but, those two friends, there's some really terrible things that they say and do to one another. And of course they changed the world. But when I left the theater, I thought, well, this place still feels very now because we're still dealing with some of those issues, but we have come a long way. We have a long way to go. I don't know. I just feel like our work lately has left, the Phoenix work has left me feeling hopeful when I leave the theater. And I feel like that's going to be even more important as we move forward.
Yeah, I'm very much in that same place, and I think though some people I think of some of Summit's work so far as being more on the dramatic end, I feel like there's been hope in every story, and I think that's really important to me too, that the characters are more like, you know, there's I really struggle with plays that are where people aren't redeemable, or where, you know, you're just left like, I can't handle that right now. Like, I can't handle plays that really just live in a realm of violence, or look at how bad things can be, or, you know, and at the same time, I can't live in a world of fluff either.
I'm right there with you. And then you also want to be in the hands of a really good playwright too. So it's like, you know, it's tough. It's very tough.
So, it's definitely a balancing act right now, I think, to find the content that really, and it doesn't all have to speak, you know, right to this moment. I mean, but there certainly is work that does, but I think just, I don't know, it lives somewhere in between being something fluffy and something too heavy. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like we're going through what I hope proves to be a real reckoning right now. And so I'm interested in work that's doing that. It's doing the work of challenging us to, you know, grow ourselves, see things from different point of view, question things that we've taken for granted, or beliefs we have, or yeah, that kind of stuff. I mean, I feel like that's sort of the place that I'm living in, is I'm looking for that kind of content. I will say for myself, I know that I'm really, really craving theater, like live in-person theater, or even, I mean, you know, just going to get coffee with friends, which you can kind of do right now, but I miss that. Jerome, who I was in Agitators with, he would say, like, theater is my church, and I've always felt that same way too.
Diane Conrad introduced me to that concept probably 20 years ago. She's like, this is my church. I'm like, oh, this is our church, isn't it? This is where we
it's that sense of community, and, you know, I have found as an artist, like, you learn about the world through acting, or just going, you know, seeing plays and participating in theater. It's a really wonderful way to get inside of different people's experiences, and so yeah, I mean, it is that, and for me, I think it's just like, I'm not going to take that for granted, I guess, because I'm getting to a point where it's hard. I really, really miss it in my life, and I miss acting in my life too. So, and the Zoom stuff is.
You did such lovely work. You really did. You did such lovely work in the Agitators, and I look at a performance like that, and I've been this great pause has allowed me to, like, take in more conversations when I, like, not with me personally, but I listened to one with Patrick Stewart on Fresh Air that was recorded in April, and I just watched a little bit of a TED Talk with Adam Driver, and it is about how I think we artists probably live fully through, we theater artists, actors specifically, if we're really doing our job, we probably live most fully when we're embodying another character. If we really let our guards down, we live fully through them. And I just think about your work as Susan B. Anthony and Jerome's as Frederick Douglass, and I thought, well, those were such moving performances. And I really am sorry you guys did not get another week, because I was tremendously impressed with how the show had grown in the 3 weeks I had seen it from beginning to the closing show. And I think it's really hard. I mean, you know, I'm not a sculptor, I'm not a painter, I'm not a violinist. Those are all things I can do on my own, but to create theater is such a communal experience. And then it is like our church, and not being able to be with other of our churchgoers in that thing. It's really hard. And that's why I think I've been reluctant to really delve into, like, reading scripts, because I'm like, I don't know that the script's gonna be relevant in 6 months, let alone 3 weeks, right? So
yeah, I've been finding a similar thing, and I appreciate that, like, we're all doing what we can digitally, and yet at the same time I find myself like, that's not what I want. Like, I want, you know, this, and yeah, it's funny because like I had, since we started Summit, I hadn't been acting as much. I think I did Cry It Out was happening at the same time as when our first show opened. So our first show was in performances and I was in rehearsal for Cry It Out with the Phoenix. And then
momentous 2018.
What'd you say?
That was a momentous 2018, that window.
Right. Oh, yeah, it was. And then, I mean, it doesn't really feel like that long, but I know actors who are like, if I don't have a project, I'm going crazy. And so I did that. And then I don't think I had, you know, I did some readings and stuff like that, but I don't, now I'm like questioning my own memory. I don't think I did anything until Agitators. And it really, like the bug, like re-bit me with that show, I think. And then just a little ways into COVID, I was like, oh, I really miss acting. Like I need it. It does something. And what's interesting is I think I actually, so I'm an introvert, a major introvert. And I think something about acting challenges me and actually brings out, you know, parts of me and sides of me and things that I would not, don't come out in my social interactions. And I think in a weird way, it's something that I just need as a person. It fulfills something for me socially that I don't necessarily get just being out with people, which is interesting. But yeah, I don't know.
I read an article or interview with Judy Davis, the Australian actor, and she's an introvert by nature. And she said acting has made her a more generous human being. And I don't think she meant by, you know, giving money to the world. I think she just meant about being emotionally available and more engaged in the world is what she was saying. It's just, so speaking of Summit, like a little bit of what the impetus was to create Summit. I know you worked with some other people on creating the company, what its purpose began as, and is it morphing into something different, even
Sure.
COVID-19?
Sure. So Georgiana Smith Wade and I founded the company. We were incorporated in 2017, but we didn't do our first production till June and July of 2018. And this was all, you know, I mean, the idea actually though was in the works before that. So prior to the 2016 presidential election, and we were already talking about it when the big Women's March happened. And so it was, and then like the Me Too movement, I mean, it was all these things were happening surrounding women's issues. And it had been an idea that had come up just in talks of, you know, the Phoenix was building the new building, and there was this idea of kind of incubating some younger or new theater companies. And I was like, that's a really great opportunity. And that's sort of where I stopped thinking about it until closer to the election. And then like the Billy Bush video came out and the other and I was like, well, okay, you know, this isn't something I had never really claimed like the title of feminist before. It wasn't just, I mean, I am one just because I think that women should have equal rights. That's pretty much the definition, right? But I just hadn't really claimed it. But just in looking at the discrepancy between the amount of roles that male actors get versus female actors, or gender nonconforming actors, and like the number of male playwrights, or specifically male white playwrights whose work gets professionally produced versus women, just purely by looking at that. I mean, I think I have this sort of intrinsic, I want things to be just. I want them to be just and fair in the world. And so I think just in looking at that, I'm like, okay, something needs to be done, and I can do it on a smaller scale here in Indianapolis just by trying to increase the number of roles and the number of female playwrights produced. And so that's really where the drive for me came from. And yeah, and so I reached out to Georgiana, who had been the artistic director of No Exit Productions for a while, No Exit Performance for a while, and she took me up on it, and so we got started. I think of it in my head as being kind of an act of practical feminism, meaning just like I can factually create more opportunities for women. That's really what I'm after. And just inherently by producing more female playwrights, we're we're going to be exploring women's perspectives and getting women's stories, which has been so lacking, which feels ridiculous where we are, but it's so true, right? We've been sort of conditioned to just be like, oh yeah, like put ourselves in the shoes of men who are the leads in, you know, have historically been the leads in like all of the movies and all of the plays that we're watching. So that's where we started. I will say that almost very, very soon after we started the company, I have found myself just living, I can hear your dog, is that Gilbert?
They're in the room directly above me. That's probably a delivery that's happening right now.
Sure.
And when I was talking with Lou Harry earlier, the cat, he was talking about the great pause, and then he's like P-A-U-S-E, not great pauses and like cat pause. And then he made reference to cats walking across, and literally 20 minutes later, my daughter's cat hopped on this desk, just made a cross from stage left to stage right.
It has happened so much in Zoom meetings and things. It's just hilarious. I love it. Or kids running in. Isaiah runs in and pops into Zoom meetings like all the time, and we don't have a lock on the door that we take meetings in, so it happens a lot. Anyway,
no, usually I'm out in the backyard, and I've moved into the basement space to do some of this work as well. But getting back to Summit, and how did you guys end up with Lauren Gunderson's Silent Sky as your inaugural production? What were the themes of that felt like, you know, that play was relevant? And also, you had Laurie Hudson, the artistic director of the New Harmony Project, whom I interviewed recently actually for this series, to direct that project, and I thought she did a beautiful job with that script, and got beautiful performances from the cast.
Yeah, so the timing for that was I always am like, the stars aligned, which is so corny if you know the show. But Laurie Hudson and her husband David of the New Harmony Project had just moved to Indianapolis, and so and Janet Allen from the IRT had mentioned her to me, I think is how I made that connection. And so we got
Had mentioned Laurie to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Laurie Hudson. And so we got coffee and talked, and I was looking for, you know, a female director, and there aren't a ton here in Indy. And so we got we talked about it, and then the script had come to me through like, I had started with some of my former Meisner classmates. we were doing maybe every other week, just reading plays, picking plays and reading plays, and that was the first one that I chose, and I just honestly happened upon it on Amazon of all things, and we read it, and like afterward we were like, damn, that's a good play, somebody should do that play, you know. And so I almost, and that was at the same time that like we were sort of talking about Summit, and it was getting, you know, coming together. And so it was just like, well, this seems like an obvious choice. I mean, it's 4 women and one guy, and, you know, the guy is the butt of the jokes. And so, so perfect. No, I mean, and it just, the fact that the story was about Henrietta Leavitt, who is this huge pioneer in the astronomy world, but people don't know her name, and like, her work led to a lot of Hubble's discoveries, and we know Hubble's name because of the telescope, but we don't know who she is. And Annie, gosh, I'm losing her last name right now. But like, and the other characters in the play, the other women who are working in the Harvard Observatory, those are real people, and I didn't know their stories. And so it's just sort of, the play is a beautiful hybrid of like historical fact and then kind of magical realism at the same time. And Lauren Gunderson just has an amazing ability to bring those sort of historical figures to life and modernize them, like their language. And
so before the pandemic put a pause on things, we were working on a partnership on Dominique Morisseau's Detroit 67 that actually would have opened on Juneteenth and would have closed right after the 4th of July. And now we're planning to do that next spring. You brought that project to us. Do you want to talk a little bit about what appealed to you when you first read that script? And I know you did a reading of it at the Phoenix that was open to the public, I think in the fall of 2018, maybe. And Yeah, and we definitely are not canceling. We are postponing because I think it's probably even more relevant now than it would. Well, it'd been tremendously relevant if we'd opened it June 19th. But it's
Yeah, that play had been mentioned to me, I think by a castmate of a show I was in at, I think, IRT, and she lives in Chicago. This is right. She had mentioned it to me, like, have you checked that play out? And it was somewhere in the recesses of my mind. And then I was looking for a play to do for a reading and for a staged reading, and that popped into my head. And so, and I read it, and I think for me, one of the things that makes a play really great for a staged reading is like the creation of atmosphere and being able to transport you somewhere else. And
Yep.
because of the music of Detroit, it's set right during the rise of Motown, and the script actually indicates several specific tracks that are to be used. That combined with just the whole, it's set during the backdrop of the race riots or rebellion in Detroit in 1967. So and the language and all of that, I mean, it really just sort of transports you. And usually when Summit does a staged reading, we try to incorporate like a little bit of tech just to make it, like, give it that little theatrical edge. I mean, just stage lights, go a long way. And I didn't want to do the reading without the music. So we did it with the music. And also I just think the play is just, I don't know. I think she's a brilliant writer. I mean, I think she smacks of August Wilson. When you read her stuff, it has this, I mean, especially because it's a historical piece, but it just has a great depth to it. And, Black culture is so, I mean, obviously the play is steeped in it, and in the language is lovely. The characters are really beautifully drawn. Like, they each have very, their voices are very clearly independent of each other. And it's funny, like it's funny and bright. The characters are really vibrant, and all of that. And then it obviously, as we spoke about, it's not a fluff piece by any stretch of the imagination. And so, I thought the play was funny. The play had just so much life. I mean, I think you just get so drawn into that world, that time period, the music, all of that is there, the language. So that's why we chose it initially for a reading. So we did the reading, and it was, I think we only did 2 reads of it, but so well received, and tons of people came up to me afterward. I mean, pretty much everybody who came up to me afterwards said, well, you have to stage this. You have to stage this. I was like, well, yeah, I'll figure that out. And so, we just held on to it for a while, but I just think it's a really, really brilliant piece. And
I do too. And I think what I really love about her, and there are other playwrights who do this, is it really feels like an intimate play about a profound moment in time. And I was, the Agitators, I mean, obviously it's a 45-year friendship, but it's boiled down to, how Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony changed one another, and made them see things that they probably wouldn't have seen had they not had this friendship. And I just find like plays like that are intimate, but open the audience up to these big ideas or dealing with these big moments, like, and I just read something, actually, I think if I read it correctly, I think it's today, it popped up in like, I get the Daily Encyclopedia Britannica or something like that. And I think today is the day that the Detroit riots sort of officially began, by the police, white officers, arresting like 85 Black men who were at a party celebrating the return of 2 Black veterans who had just gotten home from Vietnam. And I'm like, and I'm pretty sure I just read it today. Today being July 22nd, is that what today is? 3rd, July 23rd. See, it's all just running together. Bob will figure that out when he edits this. But anyway, I think it's a brilliant play, because it's a family drama, it's an intimate drama comedy that opens us up into bigger ideas. Yeah,
and although I think you could argue that the play is a drama, I mean, I do think it leaves you with that sense of hope, which
yes,
we need.
Yep.
Yes,
It's
and then
it's interesting for us because the 3 shows that got mothballed were Audrey Sufley's Alabaster, John Morris's Detroit '67, and Katie Peterson's Lovebird, all written by women playwrights. So we're thinking that that's going to be our entire season when we come back to the theater in early 2021, is we're just going to do those 3 shows. So actually our entire 2021 season will be women playwrights, and a third of them will be BIPOC. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to us when we get back to it, but I'm like you, I'm still mourning the loss of the work that would have been this summer.
Yeah. I will say, I guess the one sort of silver lining of doing the digital versions of everything, because we have to, right? So with Detroit, it's going to be in a theater that would usually house 144 max, right? And we'll now be housing like 40 some, let's say, right?
50 maybe, yeah.
50. Okay, yeah. But I do think, since right now the plan at least is to do some digital version, most likely live streaming, and it does open the door to getting some national attention that wasn't really necessarily going to happen before. So I mean, that's exciting. At least, like, you'll be able to pitch it to your colleagues in NNPN and they'll be able to see, because I feel like theater in Indianapolis has only become more exciting in the last few years. There are these young new companies that are up and coming, and it feels like it's sort of expanding and blowing up with the city that has expanded and blown up culturally, as well as there's so many condos downtown.
And I think the quality, I don't think it's not even just the quantity. I think the quality, I mean, I've been in the city for 27 years, and it just, I think the IRT has evolved to like a new level of quality. Not that it wasn't quality before, but it's something, there's a shift that's gone on there, and there's a shift that's gone on at the Phoenix, and obviously with you guys on the scene, and then having Lori and David Hudson from New Harmony in town, and then some of the smaller theater companies are doing some really provocative new work. And
Indianapolis has sort of been culturally exploding for a while now, and I think that's going to continue to happen and be reflected in the theater world, is my hope. But I'm with you. I hope that coming out of COVID, one of the good things that comes out of it is that we've all had this chance, almost forcibly, to reflect, and.
Well, Lauren, on that note, I thank you. That was a beautiful way to end this interview. And I wish you and Summer Performance Indianapolis and Sally and Isaiah and all of our colleagues well as we continue to, I guess, evolve and grow in 2020. That's what I am looking at this year as. It's like, rather than looking at it as lost opportunities, what opportunities are presenting themselves in 2020? And it sounds like, you're where a lot of we artists are right now, which is being open to what the universe is trying to tell us. So I guess carry on.
Yeah. Yeah, you as well. I mean, I wish the same to you and June and the children and all of that. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think we're going to come out better eventually from all of this when we can truly kind of get back to each other. So. Thank you.